And welcome back. It's been officially 1 month since the government has shut down. What does it actually mean for New York and the city? Well, and also yesterday, the legislature passed the Reproductive Health Act, which confided Roe versus Wade into state law. On February 13th, the New York State Legislature is holding a hearing statewide on sexual harassment in the workplace. And here now discussing this and much more is Michael Benjamin, Associate Editorial Page Editor of the New York Post. And Mike, good to have you.
Good to be on, Darren. How are you?
I'm doing good, doing good. Let's get right at it. First of all, federal shutdown. We are at a month right now. Now, we do understand that lawmakers in the Senate have made some proposals, and this possibly could be coming to an end shortly. Bring us up to speed to where we are right now.
Well, what we understand is that there's a proposal to, there are two proposals that are out there. One would be to fund the president's wall and reopen government. A second proposal bill would be to temporarily reopen government so that the president can deliver his State of the Union address, in Congress, I think the 29th of this month. And then I guess they'll continue negotiating on the wall and some sort of payment, some sort of deal with the president. The president, as you know, on Saturday offered Democrats what they've been looking for, which is legalizing the DACA kids, the Dreamers. Restoring or making permanent the temporary protected status for Haitians and other immigrants from around the world who were either recovering from if the Haitians were recovering from the earthquake flooding in Haiti, and others who would undergo humanitarian and other kinds of disasters were given protected status to be in the United States for a while, and then many have stayed, and the president has threatened to remove that status and send them all back home. That was problematic. I thought Senator Schumer had a good response when he said the president is negotiating. He's hostage taking because he had threatened, not to make DACA permanent. He had threatened to remove temporary protected status, and now he wants to put that on the table as a deal for his wall funding. And in the minds of Senator Schumer and other Democrats, that's not the way he bargains. You don't take a hostage and then say, all right, I'm bargaining in good faith.
Right. Let me jump in here and say this. When we talk about funding the wall, I think some of Americans have gotten a misnomer that there was originally some funding that was already put out there for the wall. It's not that we're starting at zero. There's some funding, but the president wants more.
That's correct. And there are already several installments of a wall over the last 10, 15, 20 years. There have been walls that are fences, that are wired, and other kinds of electronic barriers that are already in place. But the president wants to fulfill his campaign promise to build a great, big, beautiful concrete wall, right? And that's what we're dealing with. I mean, and the fact is, when he had a Republican-controlled Congress and a White House, they still couldn't get the funding. He didn't make it a priority. So he's just looking to appease a tiny fraction of his base, and he's hurting American workers, federal workers, and then it's having a ripple effect on the U.S. economy. And he's not seeming to understand. I mean, it's shameful what's going on. If I were in Congress, I would really have a hard time, seeing federal workers and their families going without pay. I would really be pushing leadership for some sort of a compromise with the president to get these people back to work, because it's unfair to them, and their lives should not be, political pawns. I remember when I was in the assembly, when we didn't pass the state budget because we had to disagree with the governor. Our pay would be withheld. That's fine, because that's our individual decision. We weren't affecting state workers.
Right, but I think also the hypocrisy is that you have the government shut down, but then you have the Martin Luther King holiday. You've got the president traveling to the Martin Luther King Monument, and the Martin Luther King Monument is actually being staffed, courtesy sponsorship by an airline. And so a lot of people felt like that's a direct slap in the face in the first place.
Yeah, I would agree. It was bad optics all the way around, considering the president and the vice president had no MLK event on their schedule until they hurriedly made an appearance there and then left. This is really a government that really can't shoot straight. They can't get it. They're unable to get its act together. I mean, they haven't had a White House press briefing in almost 2 months because they're afraid of tough questioning from reporters.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And of course, we'll continue to monitor the crazy coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue every week here on Open. Want to go right now to the state legislature. Let's talk about the legislation, Roe v. Wade, and that historic vote taking place yesterday. One of the things that we actually knew would be at the top of the, at the top of the food chain, if you will, amongst Democrats in both the state and the assembly.
That's correct. It's a bill the Assembly had been passing for several years already. And the Senate has not been taking it up because Senate Republicans were opposed to elements of it. What the bill really does is it decriminalized abortion, took abortion out of the criminal code, and now makes the right to an abortion in the health code. But it also allows persons who aren't physicians to actually participate in abortion, and that was the objection that many Republicans in the Senate and in the Assembly had to the bill. But abortion has been legal in New York since the early 1970s. It's not under threat. Anything the president would do or the Supreme Court would do would not affect abortion in New York State. So a woman's right to choose an abortion in New York State would be unaffected by anything that would happen on the federal level. It was a campaign issue for Democrats, and give them credit for fulfilling that campaign issue. But a woman's right to an abortion and to choose for herself was never going to be under threat in New York State.
We'll bring you to a story that we had in the A section of our show, talking about Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. speaking specifically about the MTA, talking about the MTA should be under city control. Your thoughts? You agree, disagree with the borough president's call for?
I disagree with it. I disagreed when it was a call originally by Speaker Corey Johnson of the City Council and New York City retake control of the subways in New York, subways and buses in New York. As you know, City gave it up in the 70s during the fiscal crisis. It was a smart thing to do, and it should remain, I think, under the MTA. If you look at me, my concern is that this is the same city that seems to not able to get its act together to properly educate the children of the city of New York. It's the same city that's unable to get a handle on the homeless crisis and the affordability crisis for housing. I'm not sure if I really want to put the subways in the hands of Bill de Blasio and his successor and Corey Johnson and the city council. It's not something I would want. I think New Yorkers ought to have second and third thoughts about.
Yeah. Talk to me about what's coming up as you look into your calendar. What can we see that we should be keeping our eyes on coming up?
Well, I think New Yorkers should be looking at February 13th, about a little under a month from now, when the Legislature is going to hold joint Senate and Assembly hearings on sexual harassment in the workplace across New York State. It's one hearing for now that's going to be in Albany, and they're going to look at sexual harassment issues in New York State. Part of the pressure was for the legislature to look at sexual harassment in the workplace in Albany and in the legislature. And, we recently editorialized today, or I believe yesterday, that it was a wrong move to make. They ought to look at themselves first and also look at the rest of the state and maybe even have they definitely should have multiple hearings across the state to hear from people around the state about other issues involving workplace sexual harassment. It's good for New York to look at that. It's good for women to be able to talk about what has happened and to propose, responsible, workplace rules and even penalties for those workplaces and individuals who violate a woman's ability to safely work and do her job in her workplace.
Well, Mike, of course, we got a lot to talk about. Certainly, we'll be paying attention towards February 13th as we continue to cover some of these hot button issues that really that are local as well as national. Thank you, Michael Benjamin, Associate Editorial Page Editor for the New York Post, our guest here and also a contributor here on Open. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Always a pleasure, Darren. Thank you.
All right, take it easy. All right, listen, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with some more Open. Stay with us. We've got a great show still ahead in a few.